Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Cheekinators. I feel like we should get music now going, like it just feels
we
like
need to have some intro. yeah,
we need a jingle.
How are you doing, Tama?
I'm well. I'm in Cape Town, so I'm as well as I can be in this space which continues to just be violent in the ways that it forces Black people to have to assimilate and to behave in certain ways. So I'm as well as I can be in this environment. But I'm good. I'm at Open Book. We have a podcast recording with an amazing guest.
Yeah.
With Black Girl Magic, Black Girl Earthing.
Would you like to do the honors?
Guys, I have this thing about like introducing Black women and introducing Black women in the entirety of all the things that they've done and in the entirety of who we know them to be. And sometimes I don't feel that English as we hold it has the language and the vocabulary to completely honor Black women. That Black people give English so much of what it has, so much of its character. That's why AAV is amazing. It's because what we do is we give English so much of what it has. But anyway, it's all good. I'm going to introduce our guest today, who is Morgan Parker.
Yeah,
I know y'all read There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce. And Other People's Comfort Keeps Me Up at Night. She's also had her work appear in Tin House, the Paris Review, the Breakbeat Poets, Best American Poetry 2016, the New York Times, and the Nation. She's a recipient of a 2017 National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellowship, winner of a 2016 Pushcart Prize, and a Cave Canem Graduate Fellow. I am so excited to have Morgan Parker on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you.
I mean, to be honest, I did not imagine this moment happening in my lifetime. So I'm like, it's here and
you're like, oh, it's regular Why was I feeling away?
We're still feeling away. Probably feel away tomorrow. I'm gonna let people know that like I spoke to Morgan Parker and they need to come correct when they address me. Like you know what I'm saying? If you want to speak to me,
you're like I've been blessed.
How are you doing, Morgan?
I'm pretty good. Yeah.
I understand that this is your first time on the continent, and how's that been for you?
Wild, crazy. I'm working on nonfiction right now, and a lot of what I'm focusing on is this unique isolation of being an African American and like what the fuck that hyphen is about, and the kind of homelessness of it, placelessness. So it feels really significant for me to be here right now while I'm thinking about that. And part of our experience as African Americans is this Africa being this kind of like mythical continent that like we don't actually have connection to, and many of us don't expect to ever come here. And it's pretty dope to be here, and it's dope that like poems brought me here. So I'm feeling definitely a lot of things, like ancestrally, and for the first place I visit to be Cape Town is really weird. It's like I'm not like walking the dirt of my ancestors. I'm surely not doing that, but it's very surreal, and it's I'm glad that this is my first experience here to be like among writer kin. I felt really held.
I mean, Magical Negro.
Yo.
Like let's just start there. Like Magical Negro.
I want to read.
Yo, I went in. I just went ham.
You went hard.
I literally was like, if people don't like this, if I don't get one nomination, y'all not getting no more poems from me. Because I almost died in the making of this. Like,
you want to tell somebody like you didn't have to go that hard. Like
yeah, exactly. Everyone's like, oh, are you okay?
Not even like, yo, are you okay? I mean, for me, I think that I read Magical Negro. So I was telling Lutlopanono that I started reading this book while I was in the US, and I couldn't. So then I was like, okay, when I get back to South Africa, it was just too visceral to be a Black woman in the US in the time that I was, with the president that is currently there, or masquerading as president.
Not to mention what's happening here at the same time.
and to read, it was visceral. But I cannot imagine what it was like to write a book like this, and the amounts of vulnerability that you needed in the spaces that you go within yourself to read it. I mean, BuzzFeed is our problematic faith, but what they said is so powerful about Parker's poetry is a sledgehammer covered in silk, exposing black women's vulnerability and power, and underscoring what it means to be magical and in pain.
So I'm really, really, really interested, as you know, in the title, because context is we also have Americanized our English, so we also speak about the Magical Negro in the South African context. We're like, of course, you just being there.
It's similar, you know what I mean? Like, this is universal, you know?
And we wanted to know why you chose to go with that title as opposed to anything else. I mean, also some of your other titles are, you know, they're more beautiful things than Beyonce. So it's Other People's Thoughts Keep Me Up at Night. It's quite long titles. But this one is 2 words. Why was that?
I honestly think it didn't need to be anything else, you know? And from the beginning, I kind of was like, I feel like I want, whatever I'm making, I want to call it that. And it just kind of, I think, came from, I've always been interested in talking about pop culture and media representations as, you know, how that affects how we interact with one another as humans, and also like how that informs our identity as Black people. So, especially in working on the Beyonce book, you know, I'm thinking a lot about this performance of, and like how folks receive that, right? And so I was focusing it on Black womanhood, and so there's a lot of, you know, that's the way you're talking about what's the behind the scenes of a Black woman, what's the on the stage, what's the like brushing your child's hair, like what are the parts that people don't see versus what they do see, and what happens in the space in between those things. And I think that just continuing on that, I wanted to almost do like a kind of ethnographic like deep dive into what these characters mean to us culturally, and what these how these depictions like get under our skins a little bit, and they really do shape so much of what we see play out in, you know, the theater of America, you know, and colorism and all these things. Like, you guys get it, you know? And I think in and of itself, it says so much. And to have to force, the thing about the long titles is it's aggressive, right? It's like a in your face sort of thing, and Magical Negro doesn't need more words to do that, to have that effect. And like, it's one of the reasons that we were kind of like, we don't need cover art, you know, it's just like words. And it is confrontational to folks, and they're like, whoa, what's this book? Big old font, Magical Negro. And I think it also forces folks, as they're reading the book, to think about what that means, you know, especially, you know, post the Beyonce book, this idea of Black girl magic, and which I love, but it's also like there's an underside, there's an underbelly of that, which I was getting at a little bit in the Beyonce thing, where it's like, okay, but what if you're not magic? Like, remember that Beyonce might get tired, you know, like it's at once upholding and also cutting down, you know, to like ignore the humanity of someone, right? So I wanted to think about how, as Black people, we hold both of those meanings, right? Like, and it depends on who's speaking the words and to whom, you know. The phrase Magical Negro takes different terms for that reason, which I think is really interesting, and it can be negative, it can be positive, it can, you know, it really does a lot of work. And I think as a trope, it's not like deeply thought of, like we kind of think about it, but we don't realize that that shapes how we see other people in real life, you know.
I was actually going to ask that, because when you think of the magical Negro, it's often used as a pejorative.
Yeah.
There's very little positivity attached to the idea of being a magical Negro. In fact, if people are wanting to criticize you or criticize the way that you behave, then you'll be called the magical Negro or the special black.
Or like an Uncle Tom or like whatever.
Yeah, but and we never want to examine like the source of where some of that comes from, right? And what it means for the humanity of people, for the humanity of those subjects. What does it mean to be a magical Negro? What circumstances create a magical Negro? And in interviews before this, you've spoken about how you wanted to use this particular trope because there's a sense of wanting to humanize people who would otherwise not be humanized. And I think that you are quite interested in humanizing people who otherwise would not be humanized.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just trying to point at all the ways in which I feel dehumanized. Like, I'm just like, I don't know how to point this out more, but like, literally you're watching TV and you understand that the black woman's role is to serve and not eat. You know, like that is, what does that mean to like my self-development, you know? Like, and I think it forces us to look at those tropes and like, why are we so committed to them? You know, like why are they so culturally and in the media like just very important, and they like won't go away. There's something that's like valuable to the system for those tropes to exist. And the other part of it is, you know, there's that thing where Rodney King, when he was, which it's so funny because he wasn't murdered, which is like, now we're like, oh, that was no big deal. But back then, you know, watching this video of this guy getting beat just blatantly, no ass reason, part of it, and we see this over and over with police killings in the U.S. of this kind of justification as, oh, he was like larger than life, he was the Hulk. I think
he was no angel.
He was no angel. Hulk, like, yeah, there's that. I think that was the Rodney King one where it was like, he was Hulk-like strength. And then with Michael Brown, I think it was, I saw him become the devil. Like, it's like, I looked in his face, and I'm like, wow, I think, like, yeah, we can put that over there, but what happens if we connect them? Because these things are not separate. The idea that, like, there can be this mythical, magical Negro. You're not interacting with black people on the regular in, like, in an interpersonal way.
Yes.
And so, like, of course you're gonna feel like, if all you know of black people is what you see on TV, then, like, and you're like a fucking white cop who's like 22, of course you're gonna be like, I'm scared for my life, you know? Like, that's just, we're perpetuating these things. And so there's a way that, like, even our magic gets turned against us, which is so fucked, you know?
Yeah, and I think that the characterizations of, and this is something that you speak about, of people who we ordinarily wouldn't have these conversations about come out in the book, right? So this book is structured in a very interesting way. The book is broken up into 3 parts, you know, which is very deliberate, but I want to know why you wrote this book in the way that you did. It's in a very different format to how you wrote The More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce. And it's very deliberate, this breaking up. It's a theme, but there's a very different, separate breaks in this. And why did you write this book the way that you did?
I think it had to have been, like, for myself, first of all, you know, like, I think the sections was a way of breaking it up for me. It's a lot. It's just a lot. And I needed there to be this. In my other books, I order them as if there would be sections, and then I just remove those things. So in the books, even though the poems are all just kind of smushed together, there is a particular cadence and, like, series of movements that happen. They're just not pointed at. And I needed those kind of, like, interludes to be built into this book, and almost as like moments of silence and just like moments of reprieve. So that was really important for me as writing it and also reading it, and making sure that it's not something that can be rushed through, you know, like, take your time and, like, are you really listening? You know, this is not, I'm not playing, you know? The book was written in a weird way. Like, I think the order of the poems was strange, and partly that's because half of these poems were originally in the manuscript for There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce. And I always say this, like, I'm writing 3 books at once, probably. You don't know that until, I sent Beyonce to the publishers, and they were like, this is way too long, you have to cut it basically in half. And in that process, which was very intense, of, like, paper spread across my apartment floor for a couple months, I had to really think about, what is this book that I'm making, There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce? And what's the other thing? Because to me, I was like, they all go together, because I'm talking about my same shit, like Black womanhood, depression, the media, like America. This is just my stuff. It will always be my same themes. So I had to really interrogate, okay, but what are the sub-themes? And not only that, but like, how am I approaching those themes? And what are the differences? So that process was, it took a while, because I really had to kind of map out, I guess just like, what's happening, what's the trajectory of this book? And it forced me to think very early on about what this book would be. And also, I kind of had a feeling of what needed to happen to make this a book, if that makes sense. Because I had like a little bit of some bones then, and also thinking about, okay, now that I've done this here with my second book, I kind of have some vision of what comes next, I guess. And it really is, it's tonal for one thing, it's an energy thing, it's like, it really is like very kind of language focused, I think.
And it's genius, to be honest with you. I think that you do a couple of things in the poetry book. One, you use pop culture as this lens from which we can understand things. It's like, how can we humanize Black people when the things that we're watching aren't humanizing Black people? But then you also do this historicizing, where you're like, let's think about like Frederick Douglass, let's think about Nina Simone, James Baldwin, and let's bring all these people together and talk about like also in celebration of these magical Negroes, but they were also people, and I just want to commend you for that. I think that that's absolutely excellent, how you were able to historicize. So in some ways it felt like music on some beats, and then but it also felt like a scolding in some instances to be like, actually we're not respecting ourselves enough, because we also enjoy scandal, for instance.
Of course.
But we also sometimes enjoy the ways in which being magical behaves to separate you from, sets you apart as being special, as being the chosen or the anointed one, and what that means, that division, to say I am potentially not like the other Blacks, like I'm a good Black, I'm magical.
Well, especially when that is, you're appointed that, like someone else gives you that label, and I think
to transcend Blackness, right? It's like there's a feeling almost that Blackness is this thing to be transcended, that when you really
I'm not Black, I'm OJ.
Yeah.
Like that is yikes. That says it all.
Hi Tiger. But right? That's that sense of like, even in your magic, that your magic is still dictated almost by whiteness. So whiteness gets to dictate the terms of your magic. Whiteness gets to dictate the ways in which you navigate this magicalness, right? And that's an interesting contemporary criticism to make in a time when people are so almost obsessed with like this idea that all you need to do is work hard. The American dream, you need to work hard. And once you work hard, you can sort of transcend the structural inequalities that you operate in. So if you're poor growing up, those like famous like Twitter things, like if you weren't born into a rich family, make sure you die in one. And it's like,
it's like you just can't transcend Blackness.
You can't transcend.
And I think that's what the book says.
It's a powerful contemporary.
Blackness is transcendence. That's what it is. Already, and to recognize that, and really to redefine that word magic. What does it mean? Does it, take it away from the mythical or special, and just honor the stuff that is magic? Where I'm like, of course we'd have to be magic to and especially as Black Americans, to like endure so much, and just also so much on the daily, and to reckon with our history in such a fucked up way, that there is a particular strength and magic to that is undeniable. But the minute that it gets in someone else's mouth, it's ugly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really interested in the writership, so to say, and in the readership. I felt reading this book that was written for a particular type of person, and it was honoring a particular type of person, but also at the same time I felt that it was also, the readership is different from the writership. Yes, it was written for a particular audience, but actually everyone should damn read the book.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, it's not like it's not accessible. Will it make you uncomfortable? 100%. And it damn well better, because it makes me uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
And so does racism.
Exactly. I'm like, good. I'm uncomfortable at every moment of my life. So you can manage to be uncomfortable for like a few pages. And it's interesting to feel the resistance against that, where people are like, ugh. I'm like, I know, right? Like, don't feel good, does it?
And I wanted us to start with a reading, if you can read the first piece for us, just so we can have a discussion. So that would be The Strong Black Woman.
And we had an interesting conversation preceding this about, and I guess this will maybe speak to the consumption of Black writers' work, right? And what it means to be a Black writer, writing about your experience as a Black woman, but whose work is consumed by people who may not necessarily be Black women, and what that means in a space where the Black life is one of performance.
Yep. I mean, there's something, it's trauma porn. You know, it's like, they're just like, gimme. And often, you know, if I get commissioned to write something or whatever, it's basically like, tell us all your like hurt feelings, you know? Like, and I think the idea of like asking someone else to relive their pain is out of control. Out of control crazy. And I think it's disturbing, like, and that's like, I'm being this vulnerable for myself and for my sisters, but it's interesting then to see how it is consumed and how it's like, give me more, and there's not always an acknowledgement of like how much pain is in it. Anyway, you'll see. Magical Negro number 3, The Strong Black Woman. She likes it rough. When you open her up through the mouth hole, the dumb cunt hole. You could stomp around in there, it's fine. She won't feel nothing. That played out scene she loves so much, so she can feel like she got a dick. Angela Bassett at the end of the movie, smoking a cigarette. Smug bitch burning our cities down, cleavage always only a tease. With a face like, can I help you? Yes, bitch, you can. You can strip down to tears and dry cum. You can be more naked. Stop crying. I'll give you something to cry about. She thinks she's better. She thinks she's cute. She's holding out. She is nothing to hold. She is no one to worship. Inventory of her body. Hair she cut to look like a man. 2 dark nipples. The way she waves those tits around, asking for it. She's always crying. That uppity face. Holy Grail pussy, a mountain peak. Her pussy, self-defense. A lack of serotonin. A lack of vulnerability. No chill. Nothing real. No need to have her back because she don't have one. Just a mountain in a dark blue wilderness. She aches from the captivity.
I remember reading this poem and I was like...
Also, like, how rude of me to put it at the beginning of the book. I'm just like, you know what? Here's where we are.
Because, wow, when you're a Black woman, there were like, life is just a series of rude introductions, right? It's like, almost all black women can tell you at the moments, in racialized societies anyway, can tell you of the particular moments in which they realized that their world or their lived experience was going to be unique, right? Of like what it means. Everyone has a moment of what it means to be a black woman, like the first time you knew that you were a black woman and what that meant for you. And like, unfortunately, life is just a series of terrible introductions.
But also like how succinctly you capture everything.
Yeah.
So it's like the relation between black woman to black woman is that when you exude a certain form of confidence, you may be seen as thinking you're better than.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you also talk about like how men treat you, right? She's asking for it.
No need to have her back, right? And that speaks about
Yeah.
this superhero. Like you hear men say, my mother managed to raise 4 of us with no support from my father. She was so strong. Why can't you do it, right? And it's this idea that to be black and woman is to have to navigate all of these challenges without so much as a network, without an expectation of support. You're expected to always be supporting, but there is an expectation that because you are the superhuman, strong black woman, you are then not in need of that. And like the ways in which the men in our communities navigate that is so telling.
It really is. And obviously there's like sex object and like can withstand anything, and the minute you have, like you said, the minute you have confidence, of the minute you're like asserting yourself, it's like, what's her problem? This smug bitch, you know. But I think that, and this is something I struggle with in my life, this kind of strong black woman thing, because obviously it's true. Like, we're dope, you know, like we have black moms, we fucking know, you know, like that's a real thing. But again, it comes to bite you in the ass in this other way, where it's like, and this is what I struggle with, where it's like, because I'm strong and because everyone sees one thing and they're like, oh, you can handle it, it doesn't mean that I don't need or desire some help. You know, like just because I can do it, like it still is shitty, you know. And so many people, you know, on my last book tour were like, wow, I don't know how you're doing all this and blah blah blah, like you must be, because also I was like working full time, I was teaching, and I was like moving across the country.
Wow.
Whoa.
Okay.
And I was doing, and everyone's like, how is this happening? Like, you must be Superwoman. And you know, like I understand that colloquially, but also that does a violence to me, because I'm not. And there's a way in which saying that alleviates community responsibility, and it alleviates any kind of like anyone having to take accountability for my well-being, because it's like, you're Superwoman, you know. Like, what happens if I'm not? Like, what if I get tired just like you do, you know? And if you can't imagine doing what I'm doing, like, that should alarm you. You know what I mean? It shouldn't just be like, wow, you must be not a person.
And speaking of that, just made me think of, there's a line in the poem where you say she is nothing to worship, nothing to hold, right? And it's just been such a weird week. But the other day I was thinking about the ways in which, for example, women like Serena Williams have been treated, right? And how when black women seem to admire other black women, there are women that we admire like Beyonce or like Serena, we get told like, but why are you guys so crazy about Beyonce? It's just Beyonce. Why are you so crazy about Serena? Like why? Like, there is almost a sense of there is nothing special about these, and these are just black women. And almost as though to be black and woman and to be worshipped is a strange condition to be in, an anomaly. You know?
I mean, it is culturally, you know what I mean? And I think it's worth pointing out, especially like coming off of like the Beyonce hype, is like, all right, but you do recognize that in order for that to happen, we've had to make Beyonce almost not a black woman. Like, we've had to make her Beyonce instead of, you know, because that is an anomaly culturally. Usually it's like, you're not classically beautiful, etc., etc. You know, I don't even know where to start. I'm a 31-year-old single person, so everything is really hard, and I'm pretty sure I'm single because of racism. Like, I will say that, you know.
And Because like this was so early on, I knew things were about to get deep.
I know.
You know, after this, I was like, I don't know if I should continue, but like this.
And then the next one's like, I hate myself.
Because those are conversations we have, and like I don't know if the disarming thing is the realization that whiteness and white supremacy is just so far-reaching that whether you're a woman in Johannesburg or whether you're a black woman in Cape Town, whether you're a black woman in New York or Brooklyn, that these feelings of like that the goalposts will continuously always move for you. That your body, no matter what you do, will always be sexualized. So when you wear something and when Dainty Sarah wears something, there are already assumptions made about your body that this body that is yours already carries so much weight before you even speak. And how dare you be a black woman who happens to be magical? Like we love magic, but how do we treat magical black women?
Right. What we do is we ignore them. You know, like we ignore them, we don't take care of them. And I think that's like, it's just a fucking shame, you know? And I see that with some of our greatest, you know? It's like, we consume, but we don't take care of. And so many of our most beloved black women who have contributed the most to culture, we didn't take care of them, you know, and the underside of their lives was really, really dark. And I think that's something that we all, especially as artists, have to reckon with, this idea of like, I don't know, and that's something that black women feel anyway, this idea of being consumed and feeling empty at the end of the day. And I think as artists, it's something that is especially hard because when you're in public and you're doing something else, and when, you know, a book can speak for you, it's easy to forget about the human behind those feelings, you know? I think of Nina, you know, it's just, I don't know.
It's like when
my sis in depression. Like
when I watched her documentary, I was like,
I know.
Simone.
I know.
Miss Simone, right? That
it's just a goddamn shame.
Even amidst all of that, like the fact that Nina wanted to just be a classical pianist, and she had to essentially mold and change and make her music political because of what the moment expected, and we still treated her
and what the moment needed.
Yeah.
And it was so urgent, you know, these videos of her singing and weeping. It's like that takes a toll, you know, and it's that sort of thing where the trauma porn and then you don't give them any kind of reprieve, and it's just like command like tell us how we feel and what we should do, you know. And
tell us more.
And everyone knew that she was struggling, and yet, you know,
I think also think of women like Whitney, for instance.
Oh my God!
When I think of Whitney, my heart breaks.
I know.
I'm like, we saw it.
Everyone knew.
Yeah.
But it's like.
But also how even in death, right, people continue to just behave in really problematic ways. Like Whitney's is not the first death or the first like artist to pass in the way that she has.
Yeah.
But her death often gets ridiculed, and there's so much attached that gets spoken about Whitney in ways that we do not of other artists. You know?
Hell no.
There's like even in death, black women are disrespected. That even in death, black women.
No, she's just a crack whore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I'm sorry, it's fucking Whitney Houston. Yeah. You know, like
never
what in the world?
Yeah.
And I think on the same vein, I like the next poem that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the whole book. But one that resonated to me in thinking about this is Magical Negro 84, The Black Body, you know, which I'd like you to read before we discuss it, because like for me, it was just like really deep how you spoke about. We often speak, and Alma and I speak about this a lot. Yeah. We often speak about white people.
Yeah.
And
as
black
people.
Bodies.
Yeah. And we talk about black bodies.
What is
and black lives.
Yeah.
And like all of these abstractions, I think, they've just been weighing on my heart. You know, like, and I think
detachments.
Exactly.
These detachments.
And you know, language. Like, not to be a nerd poet about it, but like. Just that simple sleight of language makes such a difference. When did I, as a person, become a life or a body or a, you know, this kind of having to hold all of Black womanhood instead of just being
Morgan.
Yeah, it's and we'll go more into it, I guess.
And for me, I think it really was interesting because I spent a lot of time with Robin Kelly, and Robin Kelly hates it. He hates the fact that we call Black people bodies. He's like, they have names, right?
Yeah.
And I want you to read this poem because it encapsulates that spirit.
I want to talk to you also about Robin Kelly. I badly want to be friends with him. Magical Negro number 84, the black body. Give it a new verb. Stop writing poetry. Go outside. Make blood. The body is a person. 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 The body is a person.
For me, I was just sitting there and I was like, the body is a person. The body is a person.
Do you know the thing for me about this is the fact that Black people are dehumanized even in the way that we speak
Even
that, right? But even in the way that we describe Black people, that you're dehumanized even in everyday speech, right? So even at our most woke, at our most conscious, we're still dehumanizing each other.
Yeah.
So when people say, just the idea that Black bodies, I'm like, we never talk about white bodies. We never talk about. It's almost as though there's an innate assumption that to be a white body is to be a person, and that there is a person,
and also that there's nothing I guess confrontational or difficult to navigate about their bodies in space, because we talk about Black bodies because it's like the minute a Black body enters a room it becomes politicized, etc. There's all of that, and we understand that, and we understand how we have to navigate living inside of our bodies, right? Like that is true. But I think there's also a way in which LOL, a way in which, I just want to go on about this. It's very academic, and so that's a little bit of what I'm poking fun of. I'm guilty of it too. This the body. I was put in my Yusuf Kamiyaka voice.
And I think it also helps. We talk particularly about bodyhood or bodyship when we talk about marginality. So we would say queer bodies and Black bodies. Because it's the scholarship.
It is,
but even in the scholarship, we're doing the same erasure.
Yep. And there's a way in which it becomes once you enter that rhetoric and that kind of academic, almost highfalutin way of discussing humanity, whatever. I was an anthropology major. I'm all here for it, and reading theory and all of that. And so I understand it, but I also want to poke fun at that idea of, in doing that, we're making Blackness theoretical. I worry about the line where studying and focusing and thinking deeply about Blackness, which, it's number one goal of life, but I worry about that line where that becomes, Blackness becomes theory. Because it isn't. It's not theoretical. It's not a Black body and then here's some Audre Lorde and it just becomes this topic of discussion rather than I'm guess what? Exactly. I'm guess what lives inside the body? You know what I mean? That's what it is.
This anthropology that almost others Blackness and Black people's lived experiences almost as something to be studied and to be treated as a thing to be examined deeply, as opposed to the ways in which we treat white bodies and white, and there's almost no anthropology attached to that. And we understand the scholarly and the academic, but I also worry about what it means to treat an entire section of people as this anthropological study.
Right. Well, anthropology in of itself is racist. That's how it started. It's white people being Africans also fall in love and have families, etc.
It's a dehumanization.
Yeah, and but I'm interested in it. It's a fucked up, I guess, field, but I still kind of love it because I'm endlessly interested in people and how we treat each other and how we interact and like what our languages are and how we kind of navigate one another and what are the structures that we create around living. And I think that it has been fun to think about how can I use that like kind of scholarly research language and turn it on its head a little bit. Because I think that, you know, one thing that I focused a lot on in school was this idea of like a self-ethnography and like a, what if I look at my community, you know, when anthropology is not going to the other, what happens when you yourself become the other? It's kind of a weird shift, and I think it's valuable, and also in that way then there's a way that there is a little bit of here's this ethnography of white people, you know, and I wanted to do a lot more of that in Magical Negro, I think when I started, but America demanded that I go a different direction. But I was really like on a really kind of like high theoretical level tip where, and you know, thinking of the field notes, I really wanted like, I want to make a catalog, you know, like who are our Magical Negroes? How do I point out my own idea of what a Magical Negro is? How do I create my own kind of like catalog of these are the things that have influenced me and made, not only influenced but like built me, you know, like what are the things that have made my existence the way that it is, and just like tracking that and also allowing space to like create definitions in our own words. So in the field notes, you know, like if I say mat, what does that mean? Like to create a new definition of, you know, and like a shorthand for that is like interior, you know, that is underneath a lot of these poems is making the book wants to make its own world, right, and like make its own terms, and like here are their like little characters and things that repeat, and I think that there is that was really interesting and important for me to like almost create like a chorus, you know, and to bring in certain figures and name them and pull out, you know, the thing about the Magical Negroes, these ones are more on the on that theoretical side, but then some of the other ones are like very hyper specific, you know, like one image of Michael Jackson, and I think putting those together was really important to me to say like, okay, here's like this kind of wide idea, but also what happens if I say this is a Magical Negro, like this super specific thing, like this blip, that was a Magical Negro moment, you know? And I think being able to say that it is important for us, and that like kind of self-definition, and really in that way I wanted it to be an offering to other folks to create their own kind of like catalogs of these are my kind of like, I don't know, these are my like list, this is my archive of Magical Negroes, and it's growing always, you know, it's like we're taking notes to remember what we need to remember, and to document what we need to document, because so much isn't. There can be a temptation to focus on those larger themes and ideas instead, and leave behind one image of Diana Ross. You know, like I think that there's to say that to elevate the smallness along with the larger ideas is really a big part of my writing just in general, and I wanted to make sure that made its way into this book.
I mean, I think the book is, I want to say deeply political, because you went in, man. You were like, you know, if y'all didn't hear me in Beyonce, I'm just going to...
That's pretty much what it was. And it was a little bit of a response to like, wow, I got real misunderstood. And sometimes that was heard, but I was like, it wasn't all the way heard.
Yeah, so I'm just going to
like,
do it again.
I think I said a lot of the same stuff, but now I'm like, I guess I'll just have to say it way more plainly, you know? Like,
do you also think that you wrote this book in quite a particular political moment in the US, right? And the book is a lot more political than your previous work, but it's also in many ways a response to the much more political times that you may have found yourself in. So I'm curious about the ways in which you think that the environment that you were in writing this book shaped, or the urgency that you felt in writing this book was also shaped by the political circumstances that you found yourself in at that time. Like,
I mean, I think that's always the case, and even like There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce, toward the end of the writing, and I think this is how I got to like the schism of, wait, this is a different project, because, you know, it suddenly felt like I don't even have time to talk about the ins and outs of Beyonce, and what a shame, right? Like, I don't even have time to investigate Black womanhood and performance through the lens of Beyonce. Like, that's just kids stuff today, you know, because like straight up everyone's dying, and I think like that. It really is a shame, but there's a way in which, like, damn, I guess I gotta deal with this. And a lot of these, you know, I often say a lot of these poems, I don't know where the fuck they came from.
Come on,
that's what I was like. The ancestors jumped out. Like, they really made themselves. They put themselves in the room. Because sometimes, and I remember telling my mom this when I finished the book. I was like, I didn't make this. Like, this is not me. Some of it is, but like there was a way that I had to have been a vessel, because a lot of the lines I'm just like, whoa, like where even did that come from? And I had a really hard time where it was like I would sit down to write and think I'm doing one thing, and then I hit a line where I'm like, shit, that's what I was talking about? Like, that's where I was going? I didn't know. And I think that was the hardest thing about writing this book, was to like let those things happen, and understand that it wasn't the right time for me to have control, to just like let it all kind of, because I was like, I'm speaking of myself, but in so doing I'm also speaking of, it's also just elegies upon elegies, and it's also just like celebration of, you know, a lot of this is like, it came from the ancestors, but it also came from like my sisters and my homies, and like a lot of the conversations that we're having. So it's very like, we're all here, you know, like there are many voices. There's a way that it's kind of lives separately from me in that.
I also think there's a different type of vulnerability. So there is the vulnerability of Black womanhood in the way that we understand it and existing in the world. So a lot of what you're grappling with in the poems is that vulnerability. But there's also a vulnerability that Morgan experiences, and Morgan wants to talk about in relation to the world as Morgan, the Black woman. And I wanted to speak more about that, you know, in terms of relationally. There's also some intimacy that you led us into in how you navigate romantic relationships. And I was also...
What romantic? What's that?
Matt.
I've heard about that from television. I've heard of this mythical thing called romance.
Wow, Matt. Matt.
Can't live without them. I mean, I think, and that's another thing that's like, those things are really hard, because I know that shit and it like lives in me, but to like say it, and it's, first of all, that one has been hilarious to just watch audiences respond in like particular places like Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. You know, it's just like you can see people like, oh, that's funny, and then their face is like, oh no, that's me. Like, you can see them like reckon with this. Not to mention like women coming up to me and being like, I just emailed that to all of my homies. Like, I just put that in the group chat. And, you know, like, I think these are things that we don't always talk about, and they are kind of like hyper specific, and that's not, it's not, you might not expect to find that in like whatever you're thinking you might get out of a book by a Black woman called Magical Negro, you know? So that is like, that's something that kind of only I could write, because I'm uniquely qualified. But part of it is I'm trying to explain how those things equal the other things. Like, how do you get from the Matt situation, which like seems quotidian, to the strong black woman? I that poem, and I think that it's just really important for me to point out that like everything matters, and like even the most like well-intentioned or like smallest little thing, it all A, resonates ancestrally, and B, shapes how I understand myself and my possibility and my perception in the world. So it's yeah, I don't know. I guess that's the thing in talking about those intimate moments. It's just like, you might not have realized that like when I was walking down the street, this is going on. And so it's a little bit of trying to like point those things out. When you're holding my hand, like all of these other things are implicated. I often talk about how like time is fake, linear time is bullshit, and like how I'm just like on a slave ship still. That's like it's like a joke I have, but and I really do feel that like there's a way in which we're living in a lot of different time spaces, and that we necessarily like have access to that, and that linear time is just like the structure that is white, basically.
Sorry, but I think that it was particularly interesting as a black woman to read Morgan's poem about Mats, right? Because so many of us have had our own Mats who take form in certain ways in the book, but also because in an age where there's a sense of, and this is why I love that you made the relationship between strong black women in this, because there's a sense almost that if you're a strong black woman, you're independent, doesn't need anybody, right? It's often a trope used to diminish this desire for companionship, or this desire to, and almost make it seem as though there is something wrong with you for wanting that, right? So there's become like a sense of, since you're so strong and independent and you don't need anybody because A, we've seen you just be the strong woman and do certain things, then you A, shouldn't desire that sense of intimacy or that vulnerability, but then also that in desiring that almost diminishes so much of all these other things about you.
Right, and like, I mean, for me, it's like, just like personally on a tip, I'm really in a stage where I'm like, I never said that I wanted to trade one for the other, but it's starting to feel that way. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, wait a minute, everyone's getting married, and I have several books. Like, it's pretty clear what has happened here. Like, I was literally reading Fanon, and there's like a moment where he talks about like, when you have difficulty in certain areas as a kid, you just like become obsessed with the other thing. It's like you kind of are like, that's not working, so I guess let me just go hand on that. And that's how I think about my dating life, where it's like, okay, this isn't working, so like whatever, while everyone else is getting married, I'll just like have 5 books. Like, it's just like,
and
but I never,
sometimes 5 books is what we need.
Yeah, right. I'm like, but it also was like, I never said that means that I don't want the other thing also. Yeah. And there's a way in which, for women, the world can make you feel like you have to choose, and that's fucked up. And it just makes everything lonelier, especially as an artist, you know, to reckon with these things, and to go home and be like, my dog is meat to me. Like,
and when you speak like this, I'm often reminded of, like, you know, biographers who write about Baldwin, write this and write about the loneliness, right? So
and Baldwin, we don't talk about this a lot, but struggle with depression. Yeah. That doesn't get spoken about very often. I learned that only recently.
And so when I think about it, I'm like, wow, like, you know, it sort of feels like this is the price of like important art. Yeah. It's just like,
of brilliance.
But it doesn't have to be. Yeah. You know? And I think there's a way that they expect us to be okay with that. Like, I mean, okay, like, whatever, anyone could have a husband, but look what you've given us. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, but like, I want one.
Yeah, when they saw that.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And also the ways in which, right, people weaponize sort of this desirability against black women.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's you're a strong black woman, or you're too opinionated, or you're too feminist, and then the residual message that you get is, careful, no person will want you. No one will want you.
So it's like dimming. You have to dim yourself,
you have
right?
to,
so you're brilliant.
Which, like, I can't do that.
Yes,
I can't do it. You know, like, I'm sorry. And I think a lot about, like, dating and stuff, and people are like, maybe you shouldn't mention blah blah, and I'm like, anyone can Google me, you know, and be like, here's the first thing that's like,
also
I'll take 10 of photos.
I just want to say that I had an encounter where I had to tell someone, I'm like, look, like, I'm really enjoying this, so don't Google me.
Yeah, I know, because you become afraid, and it really is. It also changes the game, right? Like, friends are always like, well, here's how you have to, this is what you do, you know, like, can't lead with everything. And I'm like, well, it's too late. You know what I mean? It's out there. And I'm actually working currently on an essay called How I Became the Least Desirable Woman in America. So, and it really is all of that stuff. It's like not just the image of the black woman and all the ways that we have taken desirability away from them, or called it non-traditional, you know, but also me kind of like growing up amongst whites and understanding my lack of desirability from a super young age, to where it like totally fucked me up, and like white women ruined my life, etc., that stuff. And then also this thing about as an artist, and no one really wants someone who's got all their shit right up there. It just becomes like the pool becomes smaller and smaller. And part of like the math thing also, that I guess I don't really talk about this as much, but I'm like, I wouldn't be with so many of them if they weren't the only ones hollering. And that is another thing. You know what I mean? Like, all right, black men. You know what I mean? And that is, I think there's something weird happening there, where
and I feel like we don't talk about this enough.
No.
We don't talk about like the we don't talk about it enough. And then
the desirability politics, right?
And like, obviously I know if I'm gonna be, and it's not with all of them, you know, like there's somewhere I'm like, I know that first of all, underneath it all, there's always something. Like, even if I'm attracted to them because it's like because of their whiteness, maybe, you know, like all of that stuff is underneath. But in some relationships, I'm like, this is supernatural. It's not like you're thinking of it as like you're exotic. You know, some things are just interpersonally fine, and that just is underneath everything, which I think is what it is. And if we just acknowledge it, we can be okay. But I also think that like with white men, I guess, like having, I don't know, feeling more comfortable with that. I think it's almost like it would be more, sometimes I think for some black men, I'm like, it maybe would be more of a transgression to pick a black woman like me.
Yes. And also like some form of like progression, right? Like, look at me, like this is what I'm doing.
Right.
And with the black men, I feel like it's quite challenging, because it's sort of like, ooh, maybe she's not going to be in line, you know.
Yeah.
You can't control her.
But you also think of the problematic ways in which, for example, black men on Twitter behaved towards Serena Williams for a very, very long time, right? Serena Williams then married a white man, and the backlash that she faced was very interesting for me, because it was such a powerful commentary on the ways in which we treat black women that we consider to be magical, but whom we still feel like there is almost like a standard to which they need to ascend to that they may not ever reach. Like, so there are these like ideas of like what beauty is, and so much of that is informed by like European whitewashing, like colonialism and colorism and all of those things, right? And but then there's still this like strange sense of ownership that people want to exert upon black women's personhood, right?
Even though, like, do you have our back?
When?
You know what I mean? And I was kind of like, exactly. But you still want me to, I guess, uphold something on your behalf. And I think this is only just something that, you know, it's, in this book it only comes out in those weird things, but there is, I've been hearing since I was about 10 that I am intimidating to boys.
So that's what I wanted to think.
Yeah.
What I wanted, I suppose part of my question was that, like, it's just like for me, when I've heard that about myself, I'm like, I don't know what
I'm
that means.
I'm 5'0". What are we talking about? You know what I mean? Like, what is going on here? And it's not like I'm a super serious person. Like, okay, I get it. Like, I'm smart. I'm talented.
Okay.
Like,
But those are
Really?
not
you know what I mean? Like, come on.
Why are those things why are those things pejorative and
Why is that a
black
strike against
women?
me? Yeah, and like maybe
you're
I'm
smart,
confident
you're
enough to
highly
like.
accomplished.
Yeah.
Why is that a strike
But
against
it's for me, it's like, it's the truth, right? It's where I've been thinking about a lot, and I feel like what Magical Negro gave me the comfortability to do is like, shit, man, like, you find yourself in this position, and in some instances you want to try and dim your light.
Yeah.
But you can't, because like injustice is injustice, and you want to speak about injustice, and then there you go running your mouth with your smart words.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, and now you're intimidating people. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was like, also, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm not alone in that way, but I also see that it's uncomfortable.
It is. It is. And I think, you know, with that poem in particular, I remember having some conversations at panels and stuff after the book came out, and being like, I'm like not gonna date white men or sleep with white men anymore and stuff. And I was talking to, I don't even remember who it was, but another artist, and we both were like, we're trying not to do that. And I was like, well, then I'm just never gonna have sex. You know what I mean? And that's fucked up. Like, I'm trying. I'm out here looking, but you're not checking for me. And that is weird. Like, even the white men have told me, like, oh, you're intimidating. But they at least will ask me out. You know what I mean? And, like, obviously there's, like, a weird privilege, confidence thing. Like, they're the only ones that feel comfortable doing that. But I'm kind of like, don't put it on me. Because you know, black men have yelled at me, like, oh, do you only sleep with white men? And I'm like,
No, you don't.
I, like, have gone years without having sex. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. Sometimes you gotta break a fast. And you're not offering me any other options. And I think it's easy to critique a black girl with a mat. But I wanted to point out, like, both the good and the bad. It's like we can roll our eyes at Matt, but there are sweet things, and there is like a little bit of a like, it's just very complicated, you know. And it's hard to talk about that stuff because obviously there's so much violence underneath that relationship, but also those have been some of my, like, I mean, they're all fake relationships, situationships, wherein I have felt most safe, and that's fucked up. You know what I mean?
I'm sitting here and I'm like, yes, but like, that's
yeah.
But I think also one thing the book does as well is like really scratch, you know, it's like actually ripping a band-aid of the limitation of white imagination.
Yeah.
You know, and I think for me, the poem that does that beautifully is
their feelings are still hurt on this one.
And I'd like you to read the poem just before we have the discussion about, like, you know, the limitations of white imagination.
Right.
Particularly as it relates to black people, like, I don't even know where we begin with, like, this inability to stretch the boundaries of their imagination as it relates to how they picture black people's lived experiences.
That's it. It's just empathy. It's just some basic 101, are you decent or are you a psychopath? Like, if you cannot imagine someone else's experience, especially when you're looking right the fuck at it and are supposedly cued into it, and that's what makes it so offensive, right? It's like you think you think you're being like an ally, and I'm like, no. Come correct, okay? And listen. And there's a way in which, like, even your quote-unquote activism is violent and erases everything.
Yes.
And also erases your complicity. Like, white Americans love that shit, especially the women. They love to be like, it wasn't my fault.
I mean,
I wasn't there.
Like,
Look at my pussy hat. I'm like, bitch, get out of here. Like,
Stop. Stop it.
now more than ever.
Rebecca, Becca, and Becky, stop.
no, I'm like, girl, you don't know me. Truly, you don't. Where even is it in the second? Right.
Yes.
Yo, no, this poem put me through so much.
Field notes. Field Negroes.
Right. It's funny too. I'm thinking about how to like where to put each poem was like took me a minute. It's funny. I was like, this one for sure. That was like a field note. Now more than ever. This is a phrase used by whites to express their surprise and disapproval of social or political conditions which, to the Negro, are devastatingly usual. Often accompanied by an unsolicited touch on the forearm or shoulder, this expression is a favorite amongst the most politically liberal but socially comfortable of whites. Its origins and implications are necessarily vague and undefined. In other words, the source moment of separation between now and ever must never be specified. In some cases, it is also accompanied by a solicitation for unpaid labor from the Negro, often in the form of time, art, or an intimate and lengthy explanation of the Negro's life experiences, likely not dissimilar to a narrative the Negro has relayed before to dead ears. Otherwise, in response to the circumstances occurring now, as ever, but suddenly and inexplicably more than ever, this is an utterance to be met with a solemn nod of the head, and eventually, and most importantly, absolution, which all good whites are convinced they deserve. When a time or era achieves more than ever status, many Negroes will assume duties kindred to those of priesthood, e.g., receiving confessions, distributing mercy, etc. Although, as noted above, the precise connotation of this phrase is quite obscured in its usage, it seems to be uttered in moments of aha, or more bluntly, I straight up did not believe you before, wherein before equals ever. See also Negro Lexicon entries number 42 and number 43, same shit, different day, and same-o, same-o. Subtext then underscoring this phrase are quite sinister in nature, varying from your usefulness, Negro, is married to your misfortune, and time is linear, the implications of which are that 1, value is time sensitive, 2, conditions of despair are temporary, and 3, anything at all can be new, belonging exclusively to now and untethered to ever, i.e. past, future, world history. These understandings of time versus import are likely due to the fact that any spur to action or empathy for the white is often directly correlated to any present dangers facing their individual freedoms, or even simply when one feels like it. See also case study number 5, empathy. This reveals in whites a compulsion to reformation based upon desire, excitement, guilt, or otherwise self-indulgent emotions. Whereas it would appear that the Negro must live the life of the Negro ever, now, and ever, 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 and ever. And this is when I make eye contact with everyone in the audience.
Listen.
And ever. I mean,
listen. Listen.
We can end the podcast.
Listen.
I'm done.
I'm just like what? What?
I mean, also, like, okay, it goes on for so many pages, and actually what I loved about that Times review is she counted all the evers. I didn't know how many there were. I was just like, I'm going. And do you see it on the second page where there's that, like, ellipses tab with it? I was like, that was in proofs. I was like, hold on, can we add a... I was like, can we just add a little something?
And just be like, it's more and more and more and more. But I think this really, like, for me, like, part of the other poems do similar work.
I cry. Like, it's tough.
Like, some of the poems do similar work, but this one particularly is like, man, guys. Then you're like, now, America is so much better now more than ever.
right? Or when Donald Trump says something,
yeah.
or when yet another black child is shot dead by a police officer, then some white woman will have the audacity to say, now more than ever, we need to stand. Who is we?
But yeah, exactly. I'm like, now more than ever, my ass needs to take a nap because this is hectic. And
Oh, now
what I'm
than ever, I
about,
need to go home so someone doesn't kill me.
That's what I'm saying. And like, especially the parts where, and it's very poking fun at like, I mean, a lot of things, but particularly in literary communities, and it's like white people who are like, oh, someone died, so we're going to do a special issue, and we're going to do like a reading, like to honor this person. And I mean, great, that's all great and well and good, but the last thing I want is an email after someone has died that says, now more than ever, we need to speak out about this, and so can you do this reading for free? You know what I mean? Like,
and
I can't even deal with that shit.
Right?
Like, I'm sorry. Like, I felt this yesterday, and since I was born, and I will feel it tomorrow, and then again, and then again. So you're trendy, like right now, poetry reading means nothing to me.
And to contextualize it in the South African context, it's thinking about like the scourge of gender-based violence, right?
Yeah.
Particularly perpetuated against a black woman in this
Yep,
country.
yep.
And then
Right.
people are like,
But
now
ain't
more
nothing
than
new.
ever.
Ain't nothing new.
Now more than ever.
Now more than ever.
And I think that's, I mean, being here this week has been interesting and tough, but I think that that's a lot of where the energy is coming from, where these women are looking around like, we've been trying to tell y'all.
We've been.
And also, what is now, so for me, it like there's a line that you have where you speak about, it reveals and writes a compulsion to reformation based upon desire, excitement, guilt, or otherwise self-indulgence emotions. And I think if you replace whites with men in this country,
that's what I'm saying.
such a contextual.
If it's suddenly affecting you, I mean, it has to. That's that self-indulgent thing. When you think about it, guilt, that's self-indulgent. You know, like.
James, we must do better. That's like a South African proverb. James, we really must do
Now,
better.
and it's always now more than ever.
Yeah.
Like, especially when these things happen. So
Yeah.
in the context of thinking about the US.
Like, I guess we could have before, but like now.
now that 100,000
how many have to die before it could be?
Exactly. And how can it be now more than ever? Why wasn't it now more than ever 100 years ago when you...
And just by using that phrase, you are showing your ass. And that phrase says it all. You know, it says it all about what we're really fighting against. It's not this one thing that happened yesterday. It's everything. And it is what the black construction, like as constructed by whites, like that is, it's ever, as long as I can remember. Like before I was born, it was decided what my life would be like. And it's that, you know, like there is no escaping it for us. We must live the life of the Negro and ever, and ever, and ever. You can forget thinking, you know, you can have your year and the next year be on something else. You know what I mean? Like that
Exactly. And this, the line where you say your usefulness as a Negro is tied to your misfortune, right? And this constant martyrdom that black people must like ascend to before we take their material conditions seriously, right? So until you are
like why the first thing you think when you look at me is like, oh no. You know what I mean? Like,
shame.
You're dying.
Such a difficult childhood. How did you achieve anything? How did you
it must be really hard for you these days, you know, like
it's been hard for me since I was born, and it was hard for my grandmother, and it was hard for my great grandmother, so no.
But I think it's also like the poem in some ways does a lot of work in thinking about like wow, you want to talk about now more than ever and you're not talking about the structures in which like America is built on?
Well, that's also, I mean, that's like the problem with America is that like we're all just like, the past is gone, you know, like, and it's unrelated to the present. Yeah, it's like, it's clear as day, the fucking cyclical shit, but I think, and there is an inability that white Americans have to just face the past, and it's an illness, and I think that pointing at that is really important, and it's hard to do too, because it's like, why do I have to, like when I'm performing this, there's usually a moment where I stop and I'm like, but y'all don't hear me though. Like, this is for sure, like, you're not getting it. Let me just keep going. And to like force an audience to look at that everness is, it's just like, I had to do that, and that's like, that's what we all should be doing, is trying to like point back and say like, no. You're trying to keep it all right here. You're trying to keep it all, and even with this book, it's been like, I'm pretty sure that like white women are obsessed with the president. Like, I personally like don't speak his name. I've never mentioned him in any of my work, and I won't, because the fuck, I don't have time for that. And yet, inevitably, like all through this tour, I'm sitting and talking about the book, and of course the Q&As are just like the most painful shit you can ever imagine. Oh my God. And every single time without fail, a white woman will raise her hand and bring up the president.
Of course.
Why is he now in the room? I never brought him up. I never mentioned him. And do you understand how books work? Like, they're like, so since whatever year it was, 2018, I'm like, but the book was written. You know what I mean? Like, the book is mostly written before that.
Yeah.
This is not a response. And I think it's just so annoying to me that they want to just tie it back. Like, this is all about him. And they love to do that because it means that, like, this is this new phenomenon that, of course, they understand that they're, they're being damaged by it as well.
Yeah.
Whereas if I wrote hella poems in here in 2015 when, like, you didn't even recognize that you're part of the problem, and so I think it has been very interesting for me to see them try to contextualize it in the right now, where I'm like, no, none of these poems are about that.
And also to try and think that you would be so obsessed
Right?
at 45. Like, why would you do that?
I got hundreds of years to pull on. Like, we're not even there yet. You know what I mean?
But also, like,
we're still on the boat. Like,
when people say this is not the America that we know, and it's like the selective.
so who are you? What are you knowing? Like,
but also the selective ways in which, and this is why I thought it was such an interesting commentary on like the limitation of white people's ability to imagine black people's lived experiences, right?
Yeah.
Because now, like you're saying, that now that you have a president who's potentially threatening your own personal rights as a white woman, that it now suddenly changes, right? That now this makes you reimagine in America when the lived experience of black people in the U.S.
And we empathize with you all the damn time.
True.
You know what I mean? Like, the Black Liberation Movement had to take a backseat for the feminist movement. You know what I mean? Like, that's all bullshit. And black women have been asked forever to choose, like, oh, you're like, are you feminist or are you like all of that?
Are you race, Yeah,
exactly.
Are you black
like,
or are you woman?
That's what like, am I black or woman today? I don't know.
I don't know what this body looks like when I walk into it.
Right. And I think it's, I think they don't really recognize how much we are on the daily just being empathetic to them and just fucking decent, and you cannot offer that back.
To in our dehumanization, humanize.
Yeah,
it's like we extend a sort of empathy.
Yeah,
right, that we will never
and it's
receive.
Fucking graceful, like that's magic.
Like
that, like if someone's spitting in your face and you're still like, wow, I feel bad for you, like. You really got, like, you're ill, like, I feel for you, honestly, and I know where it's coming from, and blah, blah, blah. Like, we understand all of that, and yet you cannot understand where anything in me comes from, and in fact, you refuse to, because I'm trying to explain it to you.
And many people have, like, it's like these things are here, and they're still here, and you're like...
And there's not that same sort of like research on white people. I just happen to know everything about them from being around them. It's like I've collected that data since I was a kid. That's what we do. We like learn we understand.
We don't
this is
have
how
the
they
luxury
are.
to remain
Yes.
ignorant about
Yep.
our
We don't have the luxury to
environment.
sit down and see that someone's doing something and like
Continue.
just like yeah,
And continue.
exactly.
Like, being conscious of what is happening and continue.
And that's where
Drag
it all connects. Like now it's now more than ever. It's like duh. Like this is how we get here. You're not looking around, and that's what I'm talking about. It's like this is a fucking psychosis.
Yeah.
Like there's a problem here where there's just an inability or refusal, really, because it's not that it's impossible. But it's almost like they fucking short circuit. Like they can't even deal with it. And even just the way, like, I can't tell you enough about air travel as a black woman. Like my body doesn't exist. I don't think. You know. And like,
Oh my God, we're talking about that today.
When you
Instead of like, you know, there's an article that somebody wrote about why, so when they're on the pavements on the sidewalk, how white women don't move out of the way.
They don't.
So today I'm at the airport just minding my own business. Instead of saying excuse me,
they don't say that.
this woman shoves me to get her back, and so I'm like, but my darling, you didn't see that I was here. You couldn't just extend some grace. But that's what it means to just not see people as
Exactly.
people. That you could shove me and have almost no feelings or no sense of like repentance or like.
It gets me like so tight, and like I like tweeted this recently. Like, has a white woman ever said excuse me? And white women went crazy, which I did not expect everyone to like freak out. And like literally, fucking Joyce Carol Oates like retweeted and was like, yes. I'm just like,
breathe,
y'all, take a minute. if I'm saying this and a bunch of black women are like, oh my God, I know. And your first thing is to say, I do. I'm like, bitch, I'm not asking for a head count. Get out of here. I'm saying something else.
And there's also an absolution, right?
Yeah.
It's
you want me to be like, thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're so kind.
You know?
Here's a cookie for you.
And people just really don't understand this. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been bumped into, like, daily. It's more than one per day. There was one time in New York, a woman bumped by me, and I just lost it. I turned around and I was like, I have a body! I just screamed at her. And she didn't react. I'm like, this is, and a bunch of women of color had said, well, I just don't move out of the way anymore. And I'm like, I can't do that. I already walk into stuff on accident because I'm clumsy. My body would be bruised up. Like, it's... And so at what point, like, when am I going to do that just to make a point? Because I know you're going to walk right into me. So instead, I have to fucking Pac-Man my way through the world.
Walk into the streets.
Yeah.
Basically.
And that's also something, like, men don't understand that. Like, I feel like I told this to Nana yesterday. I was like, wow, 3 white women bumped into me the other day, like here. And he was like, what? Like, he just couldn't...
Compute it.
Yeah. Which, like, I mean...
And it's also like a privilege that,
of course,
like that we don't think about, like that the actual taking up of space, right? Exists differently for different bodies.
Yeah. Well, and of course, like you have a black man, and the difference is like everyone's looking at you like you're terrifying. Yeah, which is like that's a different thing. But I think, and also like we're aware of that. But also, I think a lot of times black men are not aware of like the ways that we feel invisible, and so then when they add on to it, you know, who can blame me for going for a mat? You know what I mean? Like you're adding on to this and not realizing that everything about our existence is like doubling down on telling you that you're invisible and that you literally not only do you not matter, but like you're not made of matter. Like, you know, you're just. Only as good as what your book is. And
I want to know, when you wrote Magical Negro, were there specific hopes that you had for the book? As in, you know, as I as a reader, that you'd hope that there were 2 or 3 things that I could take out of the book.
I think, and I don't think that I usually think about those things. With the last book, I really was like permission to be like to have multiplicity, you know. And with this one, it more was like I just hope it looks in the eye people that it needs to, you know, and just is like it's just like let me take your hand. Like that's the best I can do, and I think partly I don't know because I'm like, I don't know where this came from. You know what I mean? Like, something else is compelling me to put these poems out. And so I think my hope then is just like kinship, I guess, and holding space for one another and reminding us to continue to do that.
So much of this book is about like the vulnerability and the personhood of black women, and I wonder what it means to practice self-care in that kind of space, you know. So I mean, as a writer who exposes so much of your own vulnerability and so much of yourself, how do you navigate those spaces but also then take ownership of some things for yourself? How do you practice self-care? Because that's a real thing for black women, right? That in this race to be black girl magic and black excellence and slaying, right? But there is no space for vulnerability and for the practice of really what is.
And what happens if I'm not slaying that day? You know, like, do I have worth? You know, if I'm
can
not.
I hold space? Can I? What does it mean to really practice? And I mean, so really, I guess the question is for you. What is the practice of self-care for you, having now written 5 books? Yeah.
Oh, girl.
But
it's hard. That's why I'm like, can someone take over the taking care of me part? Because like,
we're putting it in.
Yeah, just put it out here. Everyone just be on the lookout. And it's funny because we had that panel this morning called Learning to Love Yourself, and this was one of the things that we were talking about. And I immediately was like, therapy, and I take a handful of pills. Like, I took a handful of pills before we came here, and that is how. And folks were kind of laughing, and I think we're just not at the place yet where we can always openly talk about it, which is why I do. And it seems like a joke, but it's not. I'm like, as sure as shit, I would not be sitting here if I did not do that. Like, it's as simple as, how she said, insulin. She was like, it's the same as that. Like, it's true, and it's that is care, and I think it's easy. People have a lot of different opinions about antidepressants and all of that, but like, that is care, to like elevate my mental health to like, this is an emergency, and it truly is life or death. So it's like, say what you will, have your own fucking political feelings, you don't want to be controlled by whatever. I don't care. I want to, like, I would not be here. So, and I think that, like, having my own kind of, like, agency over how I treat my own mental health, like, prioritizing my therapy and you know, spending money on that and taking the time to find the right therapist and taking the time to make sure I'm on the right meds and reassessing that every once in a while. Like, all of that and taking it seriously is really important to me, because the self-care goes beyond, it really is like keeping me here. It goes beyond like, wow, this is just hard emotionally, like it is for everybody, to like, if I step over here, it could be, that's it. And I think, you know, the other stuff is like, I'd love to take a bath, you know, that's for the like non-suicidal ideation part. But I do think there is a level of like, we can talk about baths all day, but like, to keep it a buck, truly it's pills. Like, that's what it is.
And sometimes that's important. I think that to talk about, like, we could be these amazing people who people laud.
Yeah.
But we're trying to stay alive. You know,
at the end of the day, it's just that.
That's it. Trying to stay alive. That. Yeah. I mean, Morgan, I've had an absolutely wonderful time talking to you.
Thank you.
Bars.
Thank you for extending yourself in the way that you have in Magical Negro, and in all the work that you put out into the world. I think it takes
4 other books.
It takes it takes strength, but also it takes a certain type of vulnerability to put out work in the way that you do and be like, look, I'm just gonna put it and I'm just gonna lay it all out because y'all didn't hear me the first time. So
and also it looks like my time is limited based on what you're giving to me. You know, it's like, if you're gonna tell me shit is urgent and I might die, might as well just get it all out right now, you know?
And thank you for doing that so excellently. Like, we really want to honor you for that. We think that your work allows us to think more deeply about the society and the world that we live in, and allows us to think about personhood differently. So, but also allows us to archive quite differently, to think about like what the Living Archive does. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you. It means just, I can't even tell you how it really just like fills my heart to know that this book can connect to y'all over here. It's almost surprising, but then I'm like, duh, like Black womanhood in particular is universal. Like, we get it, but it's, I'm always like, this is hella American. Like, so it means a lot to have y'all really like hear me and see me.
And also what's interesting just to think about American is that, like, in truth, we are America. So the television that we watch is American. So in some ways
the lexicon is
American. So we get you.
And also Blackness is Blackness. There are feelings that are there.
Local, but Blackness is Blackness. I really like that. So thank you very much, and we look forward to your next book. We look forward to hopefully, flying our own private jet over the sea to be like, we need to be in New York or in LA talking about your next book.
Hell yeah.
Because what we really try to do at the Cheeky Natives is to sit down and honor these conversations, because we know the type of work that Black writers do, and we feel sometimes people don't participate and don't appreciate the work that they do. And so we hope that you always have that space, and you know that you have that space here where you're able to just sit, laugh, cry, shout, scream about,
feel seen and heard.
So thank you very much. From the Cheeky Natives, we're like, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Bars.
All right, so Cheeky Natives, until next time, bye.